The story begins with a kaiju rampaging through several wards in Yokohama. The city's emergency kaiju alert system activates, and several officials guide citizens to safe locations to escape the kaiju's wrath. Meanwhile, military officials discuss the kaiju's projected routes and body proportions. It is revealed that the Defense Corps' 3rd Division will exterminate the kaiju. Soon, the members of 3rd Division arrive on the scene. Under the command of the fearless Mina Ashiro, the 3rd Division troops dive headfirst into the battle against the colossal kaiju and make quick work of it, almost as fast as Mina finishes her morning coffee. Meanwhile, our hero, Kafka Hibino, and his allies are observing the kaiju's remains from afar. One of Kafka's allies nudges him, signaling it's time to head to the kaiju's area to clean things up. They begin the arduous task, diligently scrubbing and clearing away debris. Soon, the supervisor approaches Kafka and informs him that there's an opening in the intestines team, and he is being transferred there. Reluctant but left with no choice, Kafka reluctantly accepts the new assignment, knowing it's a messy job that someone has to do. That night, lying in bed, Kafka can still smell the lingering odor of the intestines. He absent-mindedly watches TV, where they're discussing Mina Ashiro, the young and skilled captain of the Defense Force's 3rd Division. The broadcast triggers memories of a promise Kafka made with her when they were young, but he's frustrated by how different their paths have turned out. Before we continue the story, please leave a like. Today's goal is 15 likes, and friends, do hit the subscribe button, or I fear I won't be able to continue sharing these amazing anime tales with you. The next day at work, Kafka is introduced to a new part-timer, Rino Ikikawa, who is aspiring to join the Defense Force. They tell Rino that Kafka also tried to join the Defense Force, but ended up permanently working with him. Kafka explains he gave up as he became older and harder for him. Rino comments he isn't the type to give up and he can't understand that logic. Later, as everyone arrives at the kaiju cleaning site, the supervisor assigns different tasks to each team member. To Kafka's surprise, Rino is placed on intestines duty, which amuses Kafka. However, the supervisor also assigns Kafka to the same task, noting his skill in cleaning intestines. During lunchtime, both Kafka and Rino struggle to eat due to the lingering smell. Kafka offers vitamins to Rino and suggests using nose plugs to help tolerate the unpleasant odor. Later, Kafka's co-workers bid farewell to him and head home. Kafka is happy that he completed his intestine-centric duty. As he reflects on the day, Rino arrives and expresses gratitude to Kafka for his assistance. Before leaving, Rino informs Kafka about the recent increase in the Defense Force's age requirements for applicants, noting that fewer young people are interested in the job nowadays. Kafka thanks Rino for the update. Just as Rino is about to depart, a Yaju suddenly appears and lunges at him. Acting swiftly, Kafka intervenes and saves Rino from being attacked. He urges Rino to go home safely, not wanting him to risk his life without achieving his dreams. He calls out to the Yaju and a thrilling chase occurs between him and the beast. The pursuit leads Kafka to jump through a window, triggering a flashback. In the flashback, we see a younger Kafka and Mina together. Kafka recounts how a kaiju destroyed their homes and school, expressing regret over never completing the video game Gurren. Mina is puzzled by Kafka's focus on Gurren, tells him she's upset that her calico cat Miko perished. Together, they pledge to eradicate kaiju and join the Defense Force. Back in the present, Kafka struggles in his fight against the Yaju, which gains the upper hand. Just as the creature is about to overpower him, Rino arrives and rescues Kafka. Rino explains he called in for the weapon he's using, and Kafka questions why Rino didn't head home. Rino asserts that a Defense Corps member would never abandon someone in danger. Reflecting on his own shortcomings, Kafka lets out a scream of frustration. Before the Yaju can harm Rino, a white tiger suddenly appears and attacks the Yaju. Suddenly, several gunshots ring out, bringing an end to the Yaju's rampage. Kafka turns and sees Mina nearby with her comrades. Taking charge, Mina directs her allies Igarashi and Takaragi to look after Kafka and Rino, while she and the others scout the area for more Yaju. Later, at the hospital, Kafka reflects on his encounter with Mina. Rino thanks Kafka for saving him and says he looked cool during their scuffle with the Yaju. He insists Kafka apply to the Defense Corps. Encouraged by Rino's words, Kafka decides to apply to the Defense Corps once again. He thanks Rino and resolves to submit another application soon. Suddenly, a bug-like kaiju appears before Kafka and enters his mouth unexpectedly. Kafka undergoes a strange transformation, alarming Rino. Rino checks on him and is startled by his kaiju-like appearance. Kafka quickly reassures Rino that it's still him and not some random kaiju. Just then, an elderly man happens upon Rino and Kafka, intending to call the Defense Corps for help. Sensing trouble, Rino urges Kafka that they should leave the hospital immediately. In a flashback, we see Mina and Kafka discussing their strategies for battling kaiju. Kafka explains the importance of targeting a kaiju's legs first. Simultaneously, Mina tells Kafka that she's afraid of the thought of fighting a beast that's bigger than her. Kafka promises Mina he'll be by her side whenever she's afraid. In the present, as Mina exits her bath, she receives the news that a kaiju has appeared at the hospital. Immediately, she plans to investigate the incident with her team, gearing up for action. Mina briefs her 3rd Division comrades about the kaiju spotted at the hospital, emphasizing the urgency of defeating it. Alarms and news broadcasts quickly spread the news across Yokohama. Meanwhile, Kafka tries to smile to convince the old man that he's not a dangerous kaiju, but his face is so terrifying that the old man passes out. This prompts Kafka and Reno to leave the hospital to prevent further chaos. Simultaneously, a field officer informs Mina that the kaiju has left the hospital and is heading towards an evacuation area. While they run, Kafka starts some weird transformation. But then a mouth comes out of his mouth and eats a crow, making him return to normal monster form. Kafka then comments he needs to pee and can't control it and starts releasing liquid from his nipples. Feeling ashamed, he wants to die as he doesn't want to be anyone's bride. He then realizes he may have a chance at Defense Force in this form, but Reno explains they will kill him on sight. Kafka then feels something and realizes it's a Yaju monster, like the one from yesterday. Reno realizes this is their chance to escape as the Defense Force will be split between them and the Yaju. Elsewhere, the Yaju is about to eat a child. However, Kafka arrives and punches it. He tries to comfort the child, but only scares her more. Kafka tells Reno to take care of the child and decides to punch the Yaju with all of his strength, and as he does, the Yaju explodes to pieces, causing a rain of blood. Kafka tells the child that Reno will take her and her mother to the hospital and he will go away so that she won't be scared. As he turns, the child thanks him, causing Kafka to recall again his promise to Mina. He decides to still try for the Defense Force, and as he tells Reno about it, he starts to transform into a human again. 3 months later, the Defense Force is still looking for the 8 documented kaiju this year, which is the first kaiju they weren't able to neutralize since the founding of the Defense Forces. Kafka and Reno receive letters that they passed the first stage examination for the Defense Force. Reno heads to Kafka, who is on site cleaning, but he sees his head transformed and starts yelling at him for exposing himself. Kafka fixes himself, explaining that he didn't realize it and sometimes transforms when he isn't paying attention. Reno informs him he passed the first stage, but wonders why he isn't excited, and Kafka explains he usually fails at the second stage. Reno wonders if it will be okay as he could accidentally transform, but Kafka assures him he can control it, and at that moment he transforms again as he tries to open a bottle. 10 days later, Reno and Kafka arrive at the Nishi Tokyo testing site, Defense Forces Takakawa base, for the second stage examination. Kafka gives Reno insight into the base nearby and a girl approaches Kafka. She asks Kafka to move his vehicle so she can park her car in his parking spot. Kafka refuses, so the girl uses her suit's power to give her the strength to pick the car up and place it somewhere else. Kafka and Reno are left speechless. The girl introduces herself as Kikoru Shinomiya and emphasizes her passion for killing kaiju. She then approaches Kafka again, remarking that he smells like a kaiju. Kikoru wonders why Kafka reeks of kaiju, and Reno explains that they work at Kaiju Disposal Company. Kafka then goes and flips the van back, surprising Kikoru that he must have a private suite of his own like her. Kafka introduces himself, telling Kikoru to not forget his name. Kikoru comments that she came to the exam as a sort of rite of passage, but seems she may get some fun and tells Kafka that she will make a fool of him. As Kikoru leaves, Reno gets angry at Kafka for using his powers, and Kafka tries to explain he only transformed parts she couldn't see. Reno explains that the second stage consists of 2 tests, fitness and aptitude. Since aptitude is a wild card and changes every year, they need to score points on the fitness test. However, Kafka barely keeps up with the fitness test and places 219th of 225 people. Kikoru quickly comes to make fun of him. Reno is surprised that Kafka didn't use his powers, and Kafka explains it wouldn't be fair towards the others if he did, but quickly explains he should have used it and regrets it now. Sashiro Hoshina gives Mina the examinees list, guessing she isn't interested in them as only cares about kaiju killing. But as she sees Kafka's file, she decides to listen to Sashiro, which he finds a surprise. Sashiro then starts talking about the noteworthy candidates. Meanwhile, Reno also talks about them. They mention the first 3 in the fitness exam, Haruichi, Iharu, and AI, and how prepared they are for this. Reno comments those and few others can be considered elites, but the best of them all is Kikoru. Haruichi, Iharu, and AI also keep an eye on her. Kikoru approaches again Kafka, who is shocked that she is a big deal, but his butler quickly knocks him for touching her. She tells him that he made himself a fool again. The examinees then prepare for the aptitude test, and Reno comments that the last 2 years, the aptitude test was kaiju disposing of, which could raise the awareness of kaiju body parts, and that's why he joined Kafka's company. At the entrance for the exam, Sashiro introduces himself as the vice captain of the 3rd Division and reveals the aptitude test will be kaiju neutralization. Sashiro reveals that the aptitude test is neutralizing kaiju, shocking Kafka. Sashiro explains they won't just send them like that and each will receive a Defense Force suit, which includes kaiju muscle fibers and increases their strength. Putting the suit, Reno unleashes combat power of 8%. As he wonders what's that, Sashiro explains it's the suit's power that he is drawing out and that a trained general officer only gets about 20%. Kikoru unleashes 46%, Haruichi 18%, AI 15%, Iharu 14%. Sashiro and the rest are surprised that there are that many above 10%. Sashiro comments that if they are above 0% they will pass and that he never saw anyone with 0. However, Kafka unleashes 0%, making Sashiro laugh. Sashiro then starts the exam, explaining that they had positioned 36 Hanju and Yaju monsters. Each of the examinees will have an auto-tracking drone that will monitor them. If their life is in danger, they will activate the suit's shield, but doing so will mean they have failed the exam. As they start, Sashiro also comments that Mina Ashiro will also be proctoring this final exam. Kafka wonders why they have drones that monitor each of them, and if the exam was just of how many kaiju you can kill, they could have counted them with sensors. Kafka realizes that they are also assessing how they take action and adapt their ability. As they have poor offensive abilities, he decides they need to provide backup. Kafka then sees a Yaju and using his knowledge from disposing of it. He uses a stun grenade knowing its hyper-developed sense of hearing to stun it and advises other examinees that his stomach is weak and they can shoot him there. The thing starts to go smoothly, but then a Yaju appears from the side and grabs Kafka. Kafka gets attacked and injured by a Yaju. As the Yaju prepares to kill him and Sashiro to deploy his shield, Kikoru comes and kills the Yaju. She tells Kafka that no one is allowed to die or drop out on her battlefield and that she intends to finish this exam in a moment. Kikoru then continues killing kaiju after kaiju. Sashiro contacts Kafka, informing him that he suffers multiple fractures and internal damage, and recommends he drops out, but Kafka stands up wanting to continue. Reno tells Kafka that he will back him up and Kafka requests that Reno carries him. They get some weird looks and laughs but decide to go after Kikoru and provide assistance. However, no one is able to keep up with Kikoru, who goes and kills every Yaju and then faces the Hanju. She throws a grenade behind him, making it open its mouth, and then shots it in it, killing it. The exam is announced as over and Kafka is annoyed that she indeed finished it in no time. Mina comments that Kikoru is strong and Sashiro agrees, explaining that they expected 30 dropouts, but due to her presence, no one dropped out and there is minimal damage. Kikoru decides to go back and make fun of Kafka once again but then sees a new kaiju behind her, which points a finger at her and pierces her chest. Meanwhile, Reno and Kafka lay on the floor, exhausted. As this happens, Kafka expresses his awe over Kikoru, despite her numerous taunts about him. Reno is about to agree but is quickly interrupted by the monsters that thought had been defeated regenerating. Following this, Kikoru has a hard time trying to stand up because of her injuries, and while doing so, she notices another kaiju being able to speak. This kaiju quickly notices her and furthers her injuries as if using invisible blades. Sashiro, who is watching, remarks that this is not an ability that kaijus would typically have, and having learned that the kaiju was growing stronger as time passed, he concludes that he and Mina were the only one who could defeat it individually. Mina then urges Sashiro to have that monster defeated. After this, Sashiro calls for the examinees to evacuate. In spite of her injuries, Kikoru gets outraged when hearing this as the monster could continue hurting more people by the time the members of the defense force came. Additionally, she remembers her father demanding perfection from his daughter. Wanting her father's approval, she tries to defeat the kaiju but is easily pushed away. Right after, a flashback of her previous classmates' awe at her talent is shown, as she scored first on her exam. The young Kikoru was proud of her achievement and urges telling her father of her accomplishment. However, he is displeased with his daughter's excitement as he was expecting this from his daughter and reminds her to aim at perfection once more. Coming back to the present, Kikoru remembers her father's words at each attack she strikes. Despite her efforts, the kaiju still regenerates. Seeing this, Sashiro and Konomi watching start to lose hope, and so does Kikoru, and she even starts to apologize to her father in her head. As she is defenseless and about to get attacked by the kaiju, it is quickly defeated and Kafka appears in front of her, telling her that she did a great job keeping weakening the kaiju. Although she has just been saved, Kikoru is confused as to how Kafka got there so quickly. Kafka does not explain anything to her but praises her once more for her work and transforms into a kaiju. The remaining members of the defense force who had not been fighting earlier all rush to evacuate the examination site. As they make sure everyone is safe, Kafka learns that Kikoru is still inside trying to fight back. Reno is hesitant about what to do, but before he can decide, Kafka is already gone to save Kikoru. At this, he fears Kafka is going to transform and reveal his identity and get killed, but admires his friend's bravery. As Kafka transforms into a kaiju, Kikoru is confused, but Kafka begs her to keep this a secret. Before she can answer, the kaiju attacks them, and Kafka assures Kikoru that he'll clear things up once he defeats the kaiju. Although Konomi does not know it is him, she senses a sudden burst of energy coming from where Kikoru and Kafka are and informs Sashiro and Mina of this. Sashiro is confused about this as well, but speculates that Kaiju number 8 is at fault for this. Kafka does his best to fight his opponent, though he also tries to do it as fast as possible in order to end things quickly, which he tells the opposing kaiju himself as he thrusts him to the ground. He then punches his opponent, which almost blows Kikoru away as Kafka destroys the kaiju. Although the kaiju is able to regenerate, Kafka knows that its powers won't allow him to heal from taking so much damage. The kaiju starts to regenerate but isn't able to, making Kafka's speculations correct. And after Beast appears from this kaiju, but Kafka easily defeats this. After doing so, he smiles at Kikoru and transforms back into a human, and Kafka strictly tells her not to put herself into such dangers again. Just then, Rino finds Kafka and scolds him for revealing his powers. Kafka tries to talk himself out of it but fails. Seeing this, Kikoru is still confused but does not try to clear things up as she is too exhausted and faints. After this, Mina and Sashiro finally arrive. Sashiro and Mina arrive at the area where the kaiju had been attacking. He scouts the area, trying to understand what happens, but he is still confused as to what happened. He is then informed that Kafka, Rino, and Kikoru all just arrived at a shelter for evacuation nearby. Looking at his surroundings, he asks Mina what she thought of Kikoru despite her strength. On his own, Sashiro speculates that Kaiju number 8 and this kaiju's attack may be connected, as they left similar tracks. At the hospital, Rino considers Kafka lucky due to his such light injuries, but that Kikoru was also in stable condition. Reflecting upon himself, Kafka acknowledges that he could lose so much more if he got too far, but that passion can make him forget things like these, and thanks Rino for being a good friend. However, they didn't know that Mina had been listening to their conversation and steps in without warning, which shocks the two. She thanks them for saving Kikoru, and Kafka hesitates to talk to her, but stops as he wants to do so after finally becoming a troop member. That night, Kaiju number 9 looks at the news and finds out that the kaiju he had sent had killed 0 people and can't believe that Mina can be that strong. He soon gets a call that scolds him to get back on track, and he transforms into a human to act as a monster sweeper worker. However, his disguise falters at times. That's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button. Today's goal is 15 likes. Also, consider subscribing and turning on the notification bell to get notified when a new video drops. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.